Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Institute for Church Leadership. Man, I am stoked to be kicking off another year of the Institute, and we are grateful that you're here with us. We have an incredible lineup this year, starting today. I'll get to who's here in just a minute today. But man, this event is part of the bigger picture at Nebraska Christian of what we're trying to do to develop another generation of church leaders. I avoid saying the next generation because I think they're leading today, but it is another generation, and it's part of who we are and how we operate at NCC. And so we've got 6 speakers lined up for this year as a part of that development process for our students. I want to run you through who's here, who's coming up over the next semester and even the rest of the year. Just 6 events this year. In October, we have Rich Birch returning. He is going to be here the 3rd time. Incredible communicator and really practical guy talking about practical growth systems within your church setting. I think it'll be really helpful. So be sure to mark that one down. In November then, I better check and make sure. Who's next? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Megan Fate Marshman's going to be here in November talking about, we decided on this title, very specific title, Spirit-Led, Family-Empowered, Gospel-Centered Ministry. If you can accomplish all those things in your ministries, that's a huge deal. So she is going to tackle that. How do we do all that at one time in our ministry programs? Pretty cool. Then getting into next semester, we have Caleb Kaltenbach. Caleb we've been trying to get him out here for a few years, and finally we're able to do it. Has a unique story that allows him to speak into this topic of bridging the gap between your church and the LGBTQ plus community. We want to make sure we're doing a good job of that. So he'll be coming out after that. Oh man, Tony Jay is going to be with us. He's in production and stuff at North Point Church in Atlanta. Really dynamic communicator, speaks to youth and children's settings, does video stuff, all kinds of stuff for North Point. Really, really good. And then we're going to land with Carlos Whitaker, who's written a new book about overcoming his own anxiety and what that took, and how just clearing away the cobwebs was not getting to the root of the issue. He actually had to kill the spider, which is the title of his book. So really going to be a great year. I invite you to come back and bring a friend, bring a church staff, bring anyone really who you want to bring. Hey, today we have Tyler Reagin, and he's going to come up here in just a second. Let me tell you a little bit about Tyler. Tyler is the president of Catalyst. If you're not familiar with Catalyst, get familiar. Go to catalystleader.com. Really incredible leadership development community that exists to unify and equip leaders who love the church. Prior to leading Catalyst, Tyler served for 7 years under the leadership of Andy Stanley as a service programming director at Brownsbridge Community Church. He received his Master's of Divinity from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. He has fond memories of that time, except for the cold of Boston. So we're glad he's here in a nice season at Nebraska. Beautiful day today. He also is a leadership coach and does that for churches and other organizations. Hey, guys, would you please give an Institute welcome to Tyler Reagin.
Thank you. Now, growing up Southern Baptist, I expected this, everybody in the back. But we're going to move past that pretty quick. So I want to start. I just want to share something that happened to me a few weeks ago because I think it would relate to some of you. I've been going to see a counselor for the last 5 or 6 months, working on some things, and it was kind of a cool time. This guy, we met together. We had scheduled 2 hours. We usually do an hour. We scheduled 2 hours, and specifically because I wanted to work on something that we felt like if we take 2 hours, we didn't want to cut it up. So we got there. We scheduled from 11 to 1. And right about 11:52, we were right in the middle of talking about something, and the little chime went off, meaning somebody has come into his lobby. Well, if you know me at all, which you don't, so I'll just tell you, I'm always thinking about other people, like, are they okay? I want to make sure their experience is great, that they feel loved and served. And it got in my head because I was going, because usually we only meet an hour. So I'm sitting here going, this person's here for a 12 o'clock. I just know that. And he heard it. He looked at his phone, And he said, no, we've scheduled 2 hours. And he just put his phone back and went back to talking with me. Well, for 10 minutes, I was not doing well because I'm going, you want to go talk to him? I'll go talk to him. And in my mind, I'm going, I'll cancel my next hour. Like, I'm just really struggling with this feeling. And he just looked at, and I told him that. I said, I got to be honest with you. Do you want to go talk to them? And he was like, no. And he just looked at me in the eyes and said, Tyler, you're worth my undivided attention. And it was a God moment for me because it was the last time, it's probably one of the first times in a long time that somebody looked at me and just said, you, not them. And he said, they've got their own journey they're going to have to experience now if they came on the wrong day. But you're worth my undivided attention. And I remember thinking, that's what God says to each of us consistently, right? Because some of us are sitting here probably today, I'm one of a number, I'm a part of this thing, what am I doing? I'm having lunch, I got to hear this for class or this and that and the other. And I want to tell you, maybe I came to Omaha just to tell you that God's looking at you and your story and your life right now, and he's going, you're worth my undivided attention. That's a pretty sweet gift from the Lord. And that moment really shook me because I was like, nobody's told me that in a long time, And so as we talk today, I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept of being a life-giving leader. It's something that has been a part of my heart for a long time, and God's been shaping this. But it comes down to that very simple idea that God had an idea when he made you, when he created you. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I will tell you, college was my absolute favorite time of my life. I mean, I like now, and I love my kids, I love my wife. But my wife and I both, we went to the University of Georgia, go Dogs, and we would go back right now and go through college again if we could. Not because of school, sorry, because we just loved it that much. It was that much fun. But we met at the University of Georgia. I've got 2 boys. They're 8 and 11, so they're Georgia Bulldogs through and through. Again, I shared earlier, I'm still in counseling from the Super Bowl and the Georgia National Championship last year. And so we'll go through that. That's really what the 2 hours was. I'm just kidding. It wasn't. But I get the privilege of leading Catalyst. And Catalyst has been around 19 years. A guy named John Maxwell started it 19 years ago. Just curious how many people know who John Maxwell is. Fascinating. So John is kind of somebody we would say is one of the godfathers of kind of leadership and help raise a generation of leaders. And so I get to go hang out with really pretty neat people, and a lot of times people are going, like I'll get a text from somebody and they'll see it and they're like, oh, you just get text from Andy saying, well, I worked with Andy for 10 years. I still get nervous every time Andy texts me, okay? Craig Rochelle is a close friend of mine, and I don't make that up, but when you hang out with these people, a lot of people are like, well, how do you stay grounded? Like, how do you not let that go to your head? It's quite simple. My kids don't care. They don't. Do you know what they want? They want me to come home and play foosball. They want to play knockout until it gets dark. They want to make sure the dog gets let out. Like, they care about Tyler, their dad. And so one of the ways that my family allows me just to go, it's not all consuming. One of the things you'll realize throughout life is your vocation can become your identity, and you don't want it to be. It's not your identity. It's what you do. You are your identity. Your personality, your wiring, your uniqueness is your identity. What you do is different. What I do at work is different than what I do on the go. But I want the person to carry over to each of those places, and we'll talk about that for just a minute. But here's what I recognize with my kids. So Nate is my oldest. He's 11. And when we were Mother's Day this year, we had the perfect plan for my wife, Carrie. We've been married 17 years. And if you've ever created a plan like this, you know that it is by far impossible to pull it off because you have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. But these 2 boys, they were in. We're going to take her to our favorite restaurant. We're going to do these things. And the only problem is that Nate, my oldest, woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Just simply woke up in a bad mood. And his mood completely dictated the day. And it was her day. But what he didn't realize, what I realized in that moment, is even our 11-year-old has influence over our family. So John Maxwell defines leadership as influence. And I think what we have to recognize is some of you in this room you might hear the word leader and you go, that's not me. Not true. If leadership is influence, then how you steward or manage your influence is your leadership part. Every one of you has influence with at least one other person right now. And what you do with that influence right now will determine whether you get influence with 2 other people. And some of you right now have influence with 20 people. And how you steward that, your leadership journey in that is going to determine whether you get more. So here's the way I see this. I want everybody to take a second and think of two to three people who have had influence in your life. Just try to think as good, bad, and different, but 2 or 3 people that have had influence in your life. Maybe a boss, maybe your parents, somebody's having influence. Now let's separate them out. I want you to think of someone who's had a negative influence in your life. Maybe it's not like they forced you to do something, but you just were like, they did not steward their influence with me really well. Can you think of that pretty easily? That was that shift manager at Raising Cane's. I don't know, I love chicken tenders, I can't help it. Right? It's maybe somebody, John Maxwell always says positional leadership's the lowest level of leadership, so it's somebody who just got there first, right? Let's think of someone in your life who's actually poured life into you. They had influence and they stewarded it well. Can everybody think of somebody? Sometimes it's harder to think of that one quick, isn't it? A lot of times those negative ones come pretty quickly, but that positive influence sometimes can be impacted. Here's the thing about why it's difficult to be a great leader. And for me, life-giving leadership it's a simple thought. When we do our Catalyst events, we have stages like this, and we have a simple question is, we pray, Lord, would grace and life flow from our stage to the people in our room and not be required for our stage? So it's a directional flow. We want life and grace to flow from our stage, and we want to do such a good job that we're not requiring it from them. Does that make sense? So at our churches, a lot of times, if the pastor's sister gets up and sings the Easter cantata every year, we all know she's not a good singer, and we have to apologize for it, but yet she keeps singing at Easter every year. Are we taking from people that are attending, or are we giving? Does that make sense? So it's just little things of going, are we pouring life into the people? Is life flowing the right direction, if that makes sense? That's what we're going to talk a little bit about. So here's 3 reasons I think people struggle to be life-giving leaders. Number 1, it's harder. And it requires more from you. A lot of leaders will not do this because it's harder and it requires more from you. Listen, things of value require sacrifice, don't they? Things of value require sacrifice. I remember when I was turning 16, I was going to buy a car, and I bought for $700 that I'd saved up. It's going to be a really fancy car. It was a Toyota Corolla, blue, with purple tint windows. And we went and picked it up. My dad was a mechanic, so that helped a little bit. But we got the Toyota Corolla, and I spent 2 days with a razor blade scraping that nasty old purple tint off. But I was so proud of this car because I had sacrificed, I had saved up, and I bought with my money. It was valuable to me, right? Because it took sacrifice. Things of value require sacrifice. That car lasted 2 weeks, but it still mattered to me. It's not a joke. It literally lasted 2 weeks, and then we had to do something else, and then it was not as valuable to me. But it required sacrifice. Things of value require sacrifice, and a lot of people aren't willing to do the hard things for the people that they've been called to steward. The second reason is that you don't embrace the idea that you're a leader. I mentioned this before. If you don't think you're a leader, you're wrong. Every one of us has influence with somebody else, with 2, 3, 20, 200 people. It's how we steward that matters. So your influence, that sphere of influence, is your leadership journey, every one of you in this room. And then number 3 is that many leaders have not embraced their unique God-given self. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But each of us have a choice to be life-giving to the people around us. The Grand Canyon was created by the Colorado River. Has anybody ever been to the Grand Canyon? It's pretty awesome, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't seen like Horseshoe Bend or some of these places, but I hear when you see it, the pictures don't even do it justice. What's crazy to me is that the Colorado River starts at a place called Laputer Pass. It is this stream in northern Colorado that literally you could straddle each side. You could stand on either side of that stream. And that is literally the stream that creates the Grand Canyon. The reason is because the flow of that little river, now if it just stayed that size, it would not create the Grand Canyon. But with it adding more streams and more influence and more tributaries and more bodies of water, next thing you know, it creates the Grand Canyon. It's a lasting legacy, right? I remember not too long ago, Brian Houston, the pastor of Hillsong, posted this picture on Instagram. And it was him sitting in a seat overlooking Los Angeles. And as he was overlooking Los Angeles, he was sitting there, and he said 30 years ago, he sat in that very same seat. And he didn't know a soul in the United States. They were a small church that had just started in Sydney, Australia. And he said he heard the Lord say to him, Brian, you're not just going to have influence over this city, but you're going to have influence throughout this country and throughout the world. And in that moment, he had two options because he thought, I have no friends. I don't know anybody. That was 30 years ago. He was standing at the beginning of a leadership legacy. He was standing at that river. And he had a choice. How I steward my influence over the next 30 years is going to indicate whether God's call on my life and this thing happens. Does that make sense? And then he showed that picture. And if we would have done worship, it's almost a guarantee we would have done a Hillsong song. Right? And our churches were doing Hillsong songs. A lot of you listened to Hillsong United, Young and Free, whatever. Like we had music playing a minute ago. 30 years ago, this guy stood at the beginning of his leadership legacy and his journey, and instead of blocking the flow of life, instead of not managing his influence well, he is one of the most life-giving leaders. And I'll tell you why I know this. There's a few people that are his key leaders for all the global church there for Hillsong. They're some of the greatest high-capacity leaders I've ever seen, and they've been with him for 20-plus years. You don't stay with a leader if they're not bringing life to you for 20-plus years. You just don't. But he has been a once-in-a-lifetime kind of leader. So influence starts somewhere. It never starts huge. What you choose to do with the influence you have with others will either create life flow from those around you or create stale, stagnant swamps. Anybody ever seen a swamp? Yeah, they're nasty. As a Georgia Bulldog, I really don't like the Florida Gators, and I was speaking in Gainesville a few months ago, and I started just ripping swamps are gross. Nothing good grows in swamps, totally forgetting that their stadium's called the Swamp. And they're just all looking at me. They're already mad because I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, but then I just start ripping their entire ecosystem. But it's okay because it's gross. The reason swamps form is because the flow of water stops. It can't go anywhere. It's not moving the way it's supposed to move. And so stagnant things grow there. Things that you don't want around grow in those places, right? Algae and these things that are just nasty. When we get in our lives and we've got bitterness, when we don't handle people well, when we've got relational problems, when we medicate in ways to take away pain, when we're doing things to stop, it could potentially block the flow of life. And our job as leaders is to make sure that life is flowing from us, that to the people around us who we've been entrusted to, that we're pouring life into them. When water doesn't move or has no flow, it just grows things. So when you become aware of the leadership you've been handed by the Lord, you'll see opportunities to either give life to somebody around you, let the life flow from you, or take life. Let me just say this. I've been around enough places where great leaders I'm trying to think how to say this best. Great leaders just pour life into the others. That's all it is to it. The life flow is in the right direction. It's coming from them to the people around them. Now, great leaders also have people pouring into them. That's another story for another day. Bad leaders require something from you, don't they? How many of you have ever worked for somebody and you feel like they took from you versus giving to you? Anybody ever feel that? Don't elbow if they're next to you. It's a big deal, right? Teachers, if you have teachers that bring life to you, you want to be around them. If you have coaches, I bet every one of us that played any sport have had a coach who took something from us and a coach who gave something to us. Who do we want to be around, and what leader do you want to be? So the simple way I like to say this is when life flows, influence grows. Some of you want more influence, want more leadership, and yet you're not stewarding what you're currently been handed well yet. How you steward that two people that God's given you is going to be an indication of what you're going to do with the four. There's a church in Nashville called the Belonging Co. It's Alex and Henry Seeley. I don't know if you have listened to their album. Their worship album is pretty amazing. It's not bad when you start a church and your worship leaders are Carrie Job, Lauren Daigle, Meredith Andrews, and Cody Carnes. I mean, that's okay. It's decent. It's a good start. Good luck. But Alex Seeley, they came from Australia, and they started their church in their basement. And Alex recalls, she really does most of the preaching. Henry does the worship, but they'll both do both. And She recalls one morning in the basement of her, she talks about this in one of her sermons, they were having Bible study, and there were literally 5 people coming to their church, 5. And she said the move of God in that moment was so powerful that she remembers looking at those 5 going, God, if these are the only 5 you ever call me to serve, I'm going to give them my life. And now look what happens. They've continued to grow. But that's the kind of posture that says, Lord, I don't care how many. I just care about the ones you've put in my hands. That's it. That's what matters. When life flows, influence grows. In 2009, a lady named Bronnie Ware wrote an article. She was a hospice nurse. And so for 7 years, she spent, and when you go to hospice, that's usually not a good thing. It's kind of the end of the road. So she spent 7 years interviewing people on their deathbed. And she said, what is the biggest regret you have in life? And I bet if we went around the room, we guessed what it would be. A lot of us would say, I didn't make enough money, I worked too much, whatever. There wasn't even a close second. Let me tell you what she said. The top regret in the article was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. In other words, I was never my truest self. I was whatever everybody else needed me to be. I was whatever the circumstance required of me. I was whatever that workplace wanted me to be. I was whatever those people asked me to be. Now, I'm not saying we're unwise and we just go do our own thing, but man, can we not learn from the words of the dying and go, we don't want to get to that point in our lives. God has uniquely made us for a unique purpose. The only way we can give life to those around us is we have to have life to give. We have to have life to give to be okay with us. So I want you to, if you have your Bible, I don't know if you do. If not, I'm going to read this to you. But let's just start here in Psalm 139. I'm going to tell you why this in a minute. I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to tell you why this became so real for me as a leader. But Psalm 139, this is the first half of it. It just simply says this: God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I start the first sentence. Yeah, look behind me. You're there. Then up ahead, you're there too. Your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much. It's too wonderful. I can't take it all in. Is there any place I can go to avoid your spirit, to be out of your sight? If I climb to the sky, you're there. If I go underground, you're there. If I flew on the morning's wings to the far western horizon, you find me in a minute because you're already there waiting. Then I said to myself, oh, he even sees me in the dark. At night, I'm immersed in the light. It's a fact. Darkness isn't dark to you. Night and day, darkness and light, they're all the same to you. Some of you just needed to hear that today. Forget all this other stuff. Some of you just needed to hear that God is with you right now. Like we were saying earlier, you are worth his undivided attention. Now, some of you, and maybe it's not in this room, but there are people we know that when they find out that God is with them and they've been running from God, they're kind of like, wait a minute, you were there where? Wait, you were with me then? You weren't supposed to be in that room. You weren't supposed to be in that place. So sometimes it can be a little discouraging, right? But it's real that God is with us, and that should be one of the most encouraging things you've ever read. What a wonderful thought that we cannot leave God's Spirit. I love that David wrote this, because you talk about a leader who is all over the map. And it should encourage us that feel sometimes like, I think one of the reasons a lot of leaders won't lead is because they feel hypocritical. I'm going to talk about an ideal as a leader. This is what we should do. This is where we should be. Knowing full well, guess what? I don't know that I can live up to that. I remember when I wrote this book, Andy Stanley, when he said to me, he said, well, now you're accountable. I was like, shoot. So I got to write a leadership book. Now I got to do that? Okay, well, I'll give it a shot. You know what? It's true, though, right? Some of us go, well, I can't tell them that they need to act differently because, well, that means they're going to know that I don't always do that, or that, I struggle with that. Listen, that's not life. We've got to lead and push for the best and push for ideal and make sure we're stewarding this influence really well. And I love that David, who one day could be the king, just killing it as king, and the next day just make a ridiculous mistake. And then what does God call him? A man after his own what? Heart. I'm just encouraged by that because I feel like sometimes I'm all over the map, and yet God looks at me and goes, I love you. I still love you. You're worth my undivided attention. So listen to this. This is the second part of this, and this is the most amazing grace, God-loving. This is the point. This has changed my life forever, and I'm going to tell you why. Oh, yes, you shaped me first, inside and then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God, you're breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. I don't know if anybody ever feels like their body and soul were marvelously made, but, it says we are. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth while all the stages of my life were spread out before you. The days of my life all prepared before I'd even lived one day. One of my favorite things about this, and I didn't connect this for a long time, the first part says that we were uniquely made. He knit us together. But I love what he says a few verses down, while looking at the breadth of our life. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So let's just pause for a second and think about this. So if what that says is true, is it possible that God uniquely made you for a unique purpose? Is it possible that while he put your unique personality together, all those weird things about you, all those great things about you, all those things that drive your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your friends crazy, could those somehow crazy be connected to God's plan for your life? Could he actually have done this while thinking, hey, you're going to need this one day? You're going to need this one day. I think it's true that God formed us inside and out for a unique purpose. There's nothing the enemy wants more than for you not to be proud of your unique self. He wants to take you out and try to get you to chase everybody else's uniqueness. But I believe that the most fully alive, life-giving leaders have embraced their God-given uniqueness. So this happened to me. I worked in an organization, and when I was leaving, me and the lead pastor were not a good fit. So it was a church. And me and this guy, we just weren't a good fit. It was a bad chemistry fit. And we got to after working there a year, I knew it was time to go. I was called to go to another church. And on the last day, my last day at the job, he said, you know what, let's go have lunch and do a 1-year evaluation. So knowing how that first year had gone, this evaluation I knew was not probably going to be a great scenario. And but it's like, whatever, at this point, sure, knock yourself out. So we went to lunch. And he went through this whole evaluation. It was very detailed, which is part of why we didn't match very well. And he had gone through all these things. And then he slid his paper over the side. And he said, Tyler, I just have one more major concern. I was like, this is going to go great. And he said, if you are not successful at your next venture, don't blame the organization. It's probably just your personality. And I remember in that moment going, well, that stinks. And I just kind of sat quietly because I had 3 thoughts. Number one, he had just shirked responsibility for our year of working together. So he just basically was going, it's your fault, not mine, which is fine, whatever. The second thought was I thought of 2 of 6 people that started the organization I was going to and who were wired like me, who had been incredibly successful. But the third one was the one that changed everything, and it really is where this all came from for me, which was, if Psalm 139 is true, if God is the one who gave me this personality, then he made a mistake. Because according to what you're saying to me, then I have been given a uniqueness, a wiring, a personality to flounder and not to flourish, to never lead at a high level, to be someone who just kind of makes it along. God made a mistake somewhere. Because why would he give me a personality and a uniqueness if it's not for flourishing? I just thought, okay, and I don't believe that's true. And so for the last well over a decade, I've taken that moment and gone, you know what, I actually believe the opposite is true. Is that God has uniquely called each of us and knit us together for a unique purpose. And the quicker we can connect our life with that purpose, and the quicker we can connect it with our uniqueness, the quicker God will be able to use us in great and mighty ways. It's a big deal. The same David who worshiped God without hindrance is the same David who ran from God and returned to him. He's the same one who wrote all the stages of my life were spread out of you. He's the same David who called on the courage infused in our souls to defeat Goliath. He's the former shepherd boy named King believed God knit him together. He's the one that wrote that. So we're going to have seasons like David where it's like, what is happening right now? But if we can believe that we were uniquely made for a unique purpose, your design and your influence cannot be separated. I think your most influential days will come when you connect it closest to your unique set of skills. Now listen, I'm not saying we're not going to grow and we're not going to get better and we don't have to work on things. I'm saying that God gave me a uniqueness. He made me really funny and really good looking, and I just have to deal with that. I'm just making sure some of you are awake because none of those things are true, but you're a little, one, I saw 2 smiles, so that was encouraging. The core of who we are is created has to stay intact and connected to our growth. He did not make a mistake when he made you and gave. Yeah, I think so many of us, again, we were talking about social media here a minute ago, but social media has created this thing, and it's not a bad thing, but it's created this, look what they have, look what they have. How'd they get there so fast? I remember when the band Fun released Some Nights. You guys remember that song? And everybody, I mean, it was just instant, like, number one. And everybody's like, they're like an overnight success because of social media. We heard about it. Do you know how many albums they had before that one? 9. There's not a lot of overnight successes. I hate to break it to you. Day in and day out, men and women who choose to give life to others, all of a sudden, look, they get a little more influence and a little more influence. And then maybe you're fun and you write a great song. Craig Groeschel always says this, I love this, that maybe God wasn't just saving us from something, but he was saving us for something. The quicker we can connect our uniqueness with what God's connected us for and created us for, the better. Anybody play instrument, like acoustic guitar in here? Got a couple? So if you ever pick up a Taylor acoustic guitar, Taylor guitars are super nice, they're super expensive. Part of that's because they have a patent on the neck of the guitar. The way it is created and designed has a unique sound. So if I were to hand somebody who doesn't play a musical instrument, raise your hand. Okay, if I would have handed you the acoustic, a Taylor guitar, and you tried to play it, we'd all probably be walking out of the room pretty quickly. Like, it would sound terrible if you didn't know how to play the guitar correctly, right? What happens is it creates tension in us when it sounds wrong. When somebody's playing something that was designed to be played a certain way in an opposite way, it creates tension in us. What you're going to watch over your life is you're going to be around men and women who are acting counter to their uniqueness. And you're going to feel the same tension you feel if somebody trying to play a guitar that doesn't know how to play it. But when you hear that guitar played right, when you hear the sound that comes out of that incredibly designed, the way it was created to be played, there's not a sound like it. And I believe that for you and for me as leaders. When we create, or when we lead from the way we were created, there's a sound that comes out of us that there's nothing like it. But when we're leading counter to that uniqueness, you will feel it. You feel it internal. There's a tension in you, and there's tension when people are around you because they're trying to be someone they're not. Before you can be life-giving, you must quit chasing other people's uniqueness. So let me tell you why this matters to me. I mentioned this a little while ago with some of you guys. Very few people walk away from Jesus because of Jesus. Tons of people walk away from this faith because of those of us that represent Jesus. We have to recognize that we have a divine calling, a divine directive on our lives, that as followers of Jesus, we have to lead and lead at a good level. We've got to take care and bring life to the people around us. We should have the most life to give of anybody in the world because we know the life giver. Life has to be flowing into us to be able to flow to the people around us. How you steward your influence affects people's faith. I don't care how old you are or how young you are. People around you, their faith can be impacted by how you lead, not just what you say. And as you get older, you'll recognize that what you say has to match who you are. Day in and day out. What if God was raising up men and women who didn't see faith and life as separate? What if our faith and life was integrated in a way that people go, wow, wow, that person actually believes that faith is not just for Sunday. It's actually a part of their day-to-day life. What if God was wanting to start a new story in you that actually involves you choosing to let the Holy Spirit be part of your day-to-day, in your meetings, your lunches, your parenting, your friendships? So when life flows, influence grows. So here's 2 questions for you, and then we're going to do some Q&A. I'm going to pray for you. Are you living life right now, acting and leading like someone you weren't designed to be? Is there anything in you you're going, gosh, I just keep pursuing this, but it is not who I am called to be, and it's wearing me out. You'll learn as you work and you work with people, if you're in a job and you're operating 40, 50, 60% of the time in learned behavior, you're going to be exhausted, right? If you're naturally a details person and you're in a job that's super like flexible and relaxed and like you got a boss that doesn't care about it, like whatever time, who cares? Does that not create angst? How many of you just got nervous right now? You got anxious just feeling that. But then the other is true, right? If you're not a detailed person and yet you're in an administrative job day in and day out, guess what? You're going to feel that same tension, that same exhaustion. Jim Collins talks about you got to get people in the right seat on the bus. That's what this is all about. We want people bringing life to others because they have life flowing into them. So are you living life right now, acting and leading like someone else? Second one is even more important. How is the life flow into you right now? How is your walk with Jesus right now? What's your relationship with him? Because if you don't have something coming in here, there's nothing going to be coming out here. If we can't bring and receive life from the life giver, we're not going to have it to give to the people around us. I really believe this with all my heart. This matters. What you're doing, no matter what position you're in right now, whether you're at a church, you're here at the school, you're serving, you're volunteering, you're at a business, how you lead affects people's faith. The most life-giving people I know have chosen to lead from their truest self. They've become okay with themselves. The original title for this book was The Color of Your Leadership, painting who you are into how you lead. It ended up just being a chapter, but it was that idea that great leaders walk into a gray, monochromatic space and they bring life and vibrancy. Does that make sense? We've all been around. Have you ever been with somebody and you go, God, I felt like, you leave and you go, I felt like I was with Jesus. Like it's almost like he rubbed off on you or she rubbed off on you. Anybody ever been like that? No? Yeah, maybe 2 of you? Okay, good. One day you will. That's exciting. That's what we're talking about. Life-giving leaders, when they enter a room, they enter a relationship, they enter a conversation, you leave better. But most of the time I've seen that those men and women have become okay with themselves. They've actually embraced this uniqueness that's beautiful and it's good. It's not perfect, but it was perfect because God created it. So I just want to remind you that maybe today you need to hear you are worth God's undivided attention, and he gave it to you when he knit you together in your mother's womb while looking at the story he has for you to unfold. So let me just pray for you, and then I'm going to invite Andy back up. Lord, would you restore, almost like what David said, would you restore unto us the joy of our salvation? Even in this moment, God, would you restore unto us the beauty of the gift you gave us by knitting us together and creating a masterpiece, even though most of us, day in and day out, do not feel like a masterpiece. And yet you made us, which makes us a masterpiece. God, would you help us connect how our life and our uniqueness go together? Would you help us see, God, the people currently in our sphere of influence in ways that we can love, serve, and bring life to them? And God, would you just light a fire in this place? Would you light a fire in the hearts of men and women, students at this campus, churches in Omaha and around here, that will not be quenched by anything but your presence and your goodness? I pray that, God, you will bring and spark an awakening in this city, whether it's through students, pastors, leaders, I don't care. Would you just awaken this city to more of you so that more people can know you? And may we do that by leading well. May we lead the people around us to the very best of our ability and combine that with your presence and your spirit. And we thank you for a time to hang out and gather in Jesus' name. Amen. It's really quiet right now, Andy.
Yeah, I thought they were going to clap and they didn't, but it's fine.
They don't have
Thank
to.
you. There you go. That's just as a filler, just to get us into the next thing. You got to transition it. Why is it so hard? Because this is what's plaguing me right now, right? Is we believe that's true. What you just said, we believe it. I think, you know what I mean? But it's hard to accept that we are best when we do it the way God created us to do it.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard for us to believe that? You know what I mean? And why is it so hard to get to that point where we're like, okay, I just need to be myself?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. The leader that told me I was my personality was the problem. We're still really close. I'm just kidding. Not really. He the single part of my personality that probably bothered him the most was I'm not a detailed person. I'm just not. And so on Right Path, which is an assessment, if you look at the structured versus unstructured, the structured side, the three attributes for that are precise, organized, and achieving, which makes sense, right? If you're structured, you're going to be precise. It's precise as crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I don't even care what letters they are. That was a joke, guys. We're going to get you there. Here we go. Precise, organized means I know where all the blocks are. You know, I might not cross all the T's, but I know how to get it there. And then precise, organized, and achieving. I have this desire to achieve. I don't have any of those three, okay? But here's what's cool. On that assessment, for the first few years that I got the report, the right side was the only one that had attributes. So if I looked at that assessment the first time, it meant I was really low in precise, organized, and achieving. The truth is, now they've got it right, where there's attributes on the left side. And the attributes that are opposite of those three are generalist, improviser, and instinct. So for the years before leading Catalyst and when I was at North Point, my entire job was producing events, producing services, everything that happens in a live moment, in a live event, and whatever. So you want to know why I've been successful at what I do? It's because of the very thing that I was told I was not good at. I am low in precise, organized, and achieving, but I'm incredibly high in instinct and improv. Nothing rattles me. If you come to a Catalyst event, people will go, you seem so calm. I am. I'm wired for those moments. I come to life in those moments. You want to know when you get me at the wrong time? Is months of planning. I'm going to throw up in my shoe. That's not me. But when I'm live, when it's go time, I'm my best. Does that make sense? And so it's figuring those things out and recognizing them and then making sure I'm putting myself in a position that 95% of my time is not planning events, that a majority of my time is somehow leading in a live environment. One of the hardest things leaving the local church and going to Catalyst 6 years ago was I went from having an event every Sunday where I was coming alive to having 4 or 5 throughout the year. So I went 4 months without an event. I thought my wife was like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, are you depressed? Maybe. I don't know. But it was because I hadn't had that moment of being able to be at a live event. Does that make sense? So I think it's a big piece of just, I got to wrestle with these things. And when I'm feeling like I'm acting counter, something's going on, pay attention to it. What is that? What am I feeling right now? Why do I feel frustrated? Why am I exhausted? What flags are going up and what could be causing those flags? Does that make sense?
Which is why the self-awareness piece you said is
critical.
What do you call it? It's like the greatest asset to knowing about this is being self-aware about what's happening in you while you're doing life and while you're in these certain moments.
Right, because there's a lot of times we'll have flags go up and we don't know why.
Right.
Why am I mad right now? Why am I frustrated right now? Why am I short with my kids? It's because they're kids. Why? What are those things? You know, what triggered that frustration in me? What did those things? And it's just becoming aware of what's going on in my mind.
So you become aware of these things, which allows you to start to discover, you know, how you line up, who you are, and how you lead.
Yeah.
But are there other ways to help us discover those things? I mean, give us some practical tips on discovering who we are.
I think a dangerous one, but a good one is, I mentioned this earlier, is a 360 evaluation. But it's also, you can do that in a very simple version, which is, I'm going to get my friends together, and I'm going to go, hey, I'm giving you permission. I need you to speak into this. What are some of the things that you see about me that's unique? What are some of the things that you go, hey, pay attention to this, because if you don't, you're going to hurt people. Give people, you got to invite them into the conversation. I was telling the folks earlier that I did this one time, and it was my direct reports that pointed out that I'm not a good listener. And I said, what? I'm just kidding. I realized I had to dig because that one hurt. These are the people I cared about the most, probably. And they were the ones saying, you're not a good listener. And I remember going, well, that that sure stinks for someone who cares about this and this matters. And then I did some deep diving going, why is it? Why are they the ones saying I'm not a good listener? And it's because I realized that my body language really determines whether or not I'm truly, and my brain's moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. And if I don't focus and intentionally listen, then I'm shut. You can tell. Like, I haven't heard what you've said in 10 minutes. Like, I'm just kidding. But like I physically, you can tell when I stop listening. But I'm trying to do it where you're not, I'm trying to think of what's next. How do I move you to the next thing? How do we do this? But what's happening is my body's saying something different. Does that make sense? So it helped me realize it because I had people in my life that cared about me going, hey, by the way, you're not a great listener. I was like, oh, you're not good at this. No, I'm just kidding. Here's the things you're not good at. So it can't be that. It can't be this defensive posture of like, no, I want to get better at this stuff. Now, I will say this as a little caveat. You got to be smart about that. You got to make sure these are like the right people. You don't just invite anybody in anonymously to tell you whether you're doing a good job or not. That's a danger zone.
Yeah, but to have a posture of wanting honest feedback from people who love you.
Yep.
And will support you no matter what, right? It just can really propel you into understanding who you are, and therefore then, how you best lead. Now, you're going to find yourself in a position where you're not being utilized to your greatest strengths are not being utilized most of the time. That's going to happen to everybody at some point along their leadership journey. How do you best manage that, even though, even though you're not having the opportunity, but you're going to have to do that job for at least a short season of some kind. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I do. There's I think a lot of leaders, especially the next generation, they're connecting their calling and their purpose with every single task on the job. And you're like, oh, I hate to tell you this, but just serving the food might not be connected to this massive calling that you have in your life. But what you need to recognize is that task actually does play into this calling you have in your life. There are tasks in our jobs that we don't like, but it's a job. Like, I don't know anybody that does a job, unless you're a professional golfer, which would be my dream, that every day, day in and day out, you're doing what you love. It just does. The goal is to get that percentage to be as high as possible so that most of the things I'm doing them out of the uniqueness, what I'm good at, what I'm gifted at. It also doesn't give us the right to just put our weaknesses on the side and act like those don't matter. I'm just going to be good at what I'm good at. So whatever, you guys, I'm never going to balance a checkbook because who cares, right? That doesn't work either. It's one of those, you got to find some balance. I'll be honest, my last 2 years, because of organizational transition stuff I've had to deal with, I honestly feel like the last 2 years I haven't been in my sweet spot. There's parts of it, and there's seasons that we go through because of the transition, because of what I've had to work through. I had to step in and own that part of the job. Now, it has worn me out in some ways. And yet, I knew for a season, this is a part of it. But I can very well tell you that I know that season was coming to a close, whether I stayed or go. It was going to take too much out of me if I continued in it for an extended period of time, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's just an awareness, too, of going, hey, sometimes we got to listen, we all have good friendships, hopefully. When that good friend calls and they're going through a rough time, it is a sacrifice for you to give up your time and your energy to them. You're not doing it forever, but if you don't, you're not a good friend, right? It's worth it. And so there's seasons we got to do stuff we're not good at or stuff that we don't love, but we do it because it's worth it. And when we're talking about on a high kingdom level here, we're talking about lives and people and hope. My best friend's dad committed suicide a week and a half ago, and we were with him on Friday. And watching him walk through this because of faith and hope reminds me of why we do what we do. I cannot imagine walking through that moment without some sort of hope in Jesus. I just can't. And we've got a lot of people in this world that still need that desperately. So that's why, to me, this is just a consistent understanding. There are days we got to do what we don't like, but I just don't want to develop a career, a vocation, or a life where I'm spending most of my time outside of my uniqueness. That's the heartbeat.
Yeah. We want to have impact.
Yeah.
You saying, hey, it matters what we're doing. Again, the professions that we've chosen to pursue matter maybe more than more than ever, and more than others. I mean, all jobs are ministry if you're a Christian, right? But we've chosen to vocationally, ministry is a big deal. You have come here, actually. This reminds me of you saying yes to this, coming to talk to us today, because, your book releases in 3 weeks.
One week.
Releases next week, and 3 weeks from now is Atlanta, Catalyst Atlanta. And so I don't know why you're here, but
thank you.
You said yes. And, because you know that this small gathering of people, because in 3 weeks, you're going to have 10,000 leaders, and you'll be on stage with that. And now you're on this stage with, 50.
This one's more fun.
It is. Maybe. I think it is.
It's a little less stressful, I'll be honest with you.
A little stressful. So,
but I'll be calm, okay? Just want you to know, I'll be calm, cool, and collected.
In the moment, you'll be fine, I'm sure.
Totally. And then I'll throw up 17 times.
In your shoe.
Yeah, that was gross. I'm sorry.
I love that. That was great.
It's really gross.
Throw up in your shoe.
It's why I don't wear shoes with strings. I'm just kidding. It's quicker. All right. You were saying?
I don't know what
I'm glad I was here. This has been your favorite talk ever.
Thanks for having an impact, on us, and this is the thing we do. I loved how you started it, and maybe we'll land here. Is grace and flowing the right direction? You were talking about that as a leader, and how you want to be around the people who you can kind of tell it's happening. You can't put your finger on it, but it's like that person must be close to Jesus. That's all you can kind of surmise out of it, And I have had that thought in the last year, that's who I really want to be.
Yeah.
How can you tell if you're becoming that person or if you are that person? Are there any signs where that must be what I'm getting there. I'm doing the right things. I'm headed that direction.
Yeah, and I think that principle goes. Let's take Nebraska Christian College. It's NCC.
It is.
I made sure I said it right.
Yeah.
Is it bringing life to the people that it's serving? Across the board. Mm-hmm. And if there's areas that feel like they're not, then let's look at those. Is our churches that we lead, are they bringing life to people? That's why it goes back down to, are the leaders in their seats bringing life to the people around them? Because it's just going to ripple out. And bringing life to others when it comes to devotional life in Jesus, it's got to be an overflow. Scripture talks about that all the time. It's an overflow. It's an overflow. It's an overflow. If I am depleted, I don't have anything to give. And so there's a requirement that I am full of life. Yeah. And so for people like me, I really struggle with the selfish thought of I've got to be okay. Because all I want to think about is making sure you're okay. Mm-hmm. To the detriment of me being okay.
Right.
And so I think that's one specific thought I have of, which is if we're not okay, I don't have anything to give to the people around us. And I think what you'll recognize, again, our theme this year is fully alive, but it's the idea that we got to be whole. I can't just be healthy in 2 areas. I need to be healthy in 5 areas. I can't just be relationally and emotionally healthy if I'm not spiritually and physically healthy. Yeah. Because it's all going to affect that. And when leaders are operating outside of their uniqueness and then they come into a workplace, it doesn't help. Right. One of my favorite ways to describe integrity is consistency. So if we were talking about the integrity of that wall, what we're all saying is that wall is consistent, right? It's doing what it was supposed to do from the bottom to the top. That's the integrity of the wall. If we talk about the integrity of a bridge, I can expect when I step at the beginning of that bridge that it's going to be the same across to the end of that bridge. I don't want the engineers getting creative with the material midway through the bridge. Mm-hmm. It's consistent. To me, that's the highest value in leadership, is I am consistent. That's my integrity. So what I do at work, who I am at work, needs to be who I am at home and who I am on the golf course and who I am at the Georgia games, even though that might be a little different. I do different things in those places, but Tyler's got to show up at all of those places. And I think what I watch is so much of our culture divorces work, person. I know very faith-filled men and women who say, oh, I have a work mode. Oh, so that means you've given yourself permission to be a jerk to people at work because it's a work mode, and then I change when I go home on the weekends. That's not okay, in my opinion. Integrity says, I am who I am, and I'm going to show up in these different environments.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's good. This is available. It's not actually out yet, but
no, it's in a week.
We called the publisher.
I've never even seen it.
They sent us a book. Would you like a copy of your book?
No.
And we're going to have them right back there for $16, which is about $5 less than you'll get it on Amazon right now. You can pre-order it if you want to on Amazon. That's okay too. But Hannah will take care of you back there if you want to get a book right now. We just scratched the surface on this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a ton
That's
of
kind of
stuff in here.
Kickoff.
Man. So I'd encourage you to do that. And so be sure and grab those. Right after this, Tyler will be back there. He'd love to sign it, hang out. We've got some extra time. At 2 o'clock, if you're a student and you want to get more of a small group kind of coaching Q&A deal, we're going to do that at 2 o'clock right across the hall. So if you've got time this afternoon and want to hang out with Tyler, we're going to do that. And I feel like I was going to mention one other thing, but I don't know what it was. So whatever, it doesn't matter. Good. Thanks for coming, everybody. We're glad you're here, and we're glad. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Let's say thanks one more time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.